So I recently made a video talking about Halloween episodes of cartoons, and something I didn't mention in that video was how most of them from the 90s and early 2000s would have a joke where a male character dresses as a girl and that's it, that's the entire joke, that they're cross-dressing. And every time that bit would happen, I'd think, oh, that bit didn't age particularly well. And that then got me thinking about just how far animation has come in its representation of LGBTQ subjects. So today we're going to be discussing exactly how cartoons have changed in the way they discuss these topics. So let's start by taking a look at The Simpsons. If we can see how they've changed over the years in their approach to LGBTQ stories, we can perhaps get a better idea of how the animation industry as a whole has changed. We've gone from Homer being homophobic in the season 8 episode, Homer's Phobia, to Homer now helping Smithers, who's now fully out of the closet, in finding love in season 33. So whilst Homer's Phobia did present Homer as in the wrong for his prejudices, it still does rely on gay stereotypes to get its point across. Whereas in season 33's portrait of a lackey on fire, we have Smithers in a relationship with another man and everyone is really supportive of this. Also, the character of Michael DeGraff, Smithers' boyfriend, feels way more fleshed out than the character of John in Homer's Phobia. For a start, Michael DeGraff gets a last name. Furthermore, the character of Michael DeGraff, despite being a one-episode character, doesn't come across as one-dimensional. He is more than just his sexuality. He is shown to be a fashion designer, a businessman, and as we later find out, evil. The fact the characters here come across as diverse and not one note could be in part to the episode being written by an actual openly gay man who could perhaps inject the episode with a bit of his own personal experience. In early seasons of the show, Smithers' closeted homosexuality was mainly used as a punchline at the character's expense. Whereas now, this can be the actual driving force between a plotline of an episode which can explore these themes. But The Simpsons is far from the only adult-oriented animated show to delve into these issues. Family Guy, for example, has attempted several times to explore transgendered plots with Quagmire's father, and this has resulted in varying degrees of success. The show Big Mouth has received some controversy recently from some of the LGBTQ community for not correctly characterising pansexuality. However, on the whole, I feel the show has done a good job exploring all facets of sexuality during puberty and the questions this can lead to. BoJack Horseman also did a pretty good storyline about asexuality, but look, I'm not going to focus too much on adult animation here. Grandad Charlie sitting at the Christmas dinner table saying, "In my day, women were women and men were men," isn't suddenly going to change his lifelong held prejudice because now the little yellow people on TV are gay. So let's instead look at LGBTQ themes explored in animation aimed at children and families. Prior to the 2010s, this kind of representation was basically non-existent in children's animation. We had Velma in Scooby-Doo, who was maybe gay? I don't know, but that doesn't really count. The show Adventure Time was a pioneer in this respect. In the episode What Was Missing, written by Adam Muto and Rebecca Sugar, it first establishes a hint at maybe Princess Bubblegum and Marceline having a romantic history. This was more or less a bit of a throwaway line in this episode, but it then evolved as the show went on, until eventually a 2020 special fully explored their relationship. As I just mentioned, one of the first people to introduce homosexuality into children's media was the writer Rebecca Sugar, and she then went on to create her own show called Steven Universe. And this show absolutely kicked in the doors of what kind of stories could be told in children's animation. The show Steven Universe explored the relationships of a race of all-female aliens called Crystal Gems as they tried to protect the Earth, starring the characters of Pearl, Amethyst and Garnet as they raised the titular Steven, a gem-human hybrid. The Crystal Gems have the ability to fuse together to form newer and stronger warriors, and this is where we get the start of our LGBTQ representation. In the finale to Season 1, we get the twist reveal that one of the main characters, Garnet, is actually two separate crystal gems who have been fused this whole time because they were so in love with one another they couldn't bear to be apart. The show's message in this regard seems to be that you are stronger because of your relationships with others, as they can help you to become a better version of yourself. Or, from a very reductive viewpoint, fusion could just be an analogy for sex, which kind of falls apart when Steven fuses with his dad later on. We eventually see the crystal gems that make up Garnet, being Ruby and Sapphire, getting married to one another towards the end of the show. And in response to some countries censoring the gay themes by saying Ruby was male and Sapphire was female, the animators decided to dress Ruby in a dress and Sapphire in a suit for their wedding. This then caused the episode, and in fact the entire show, to be banned in several countries. But Sapphire and Ruby's relationship barely scratches the surface of the representation in this show. We had the character of Stevonnie, which was a fusion of the characters Steven and Connie, which gave us an androgynous non-binary character. There's also the subplot of Pearl's unrequited love for the character of Rose Quartz. And, I don't know, here's Steven wearing a dress. The great thing about this show is, however, that the stories don't shove it down your throat with a aren't we progressive type of plot, which comes across as insincere. It instead handles these topics with tact, with these aspects of the characters being an organically developed part of their really well-defined and multi-layered character arcs. They aren't solely defined by their sexuality or relationships or how they dress, like, oh, that's the gay character, that's the non-binary character. No, that's just one aspect of a much larger person. And then thanks to Rebecca Sugar and Steven Universe, the door was now wide open for other networks to follow suit. Over on Nickelodeon we have The Loud House, wherein a character has two dads, although I've not actually seen the show, so I have no idea if this is handled particularly well. Outside of The Loud House though, Nickelodeon can't really be blamed for their lack of representation elsewhere, as it only really has SpongeBob, and SpongeBob airing nowadays. And despite SpongeBob often being used as an advocate for LGBTQ, if SpongeBob were to actually be gay or straight, it would totally change the nature of the show, and would feel really crowbarred in and pandering. I feel this is because the show doesn't rely on the relationships of its characters. There aren't really any homosexual or heterosexual relationships in the show. I guess Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff went on a date in one episode, and there's Plankton who has a computer wife, so I have no idea what category that comes under. The point is, SpongeBob is pretty asexual, and to change that would change the show as a whole. Disney were pretty slow on the implementation of LGBTQ themes, most likely as to not drum up controversy and to maintain their brand image. In Gravity Falls, there was a pushback from Disney preventing the animators showing the two police officers in any way romantically linked. A few years later, Star vs. the Force of Evil made headlines for having the first Disney gay couple, and oh, there it is, for all of 1 second right there in the background. This seems pretty forced and crowbarred in, as it's just some background characters kissing in one shot, just for Disney to show how progressive they are. Then in 2020 came a show called The Owl House, created by Dana Terrace, and no longer was LGBTQ representation merely implied or shoehorned into the background. Here there is a full-on gay relationship with an actual proper human being, and it is one of the most natural, perfectly developed relationships I've ever seen in a cartoon. The characters of Amity and Luce start off as enemies, then once they actually get to know each other over the course of the series, they develop feelings for each other, and then just straight up start dating. The show also features the character River, who is a properly non-binary character. But the show doesn't go out of its way to point this out to you. Which is good, because if the show made a big deal pointing this out to you, then it would become a big deal, which it really shouldn't be. Although you try telling that to the angry Facebook posts and all the news articles. In the episode, the character of River was part of a larger narrative, and was simply just never referred to by a pronoun in the episode. Which again is good because it normalises non-binary characters and by extension non-binary people to kids. It's just a real shame that Disney has decided to cancel Owl House, which is really annoying. It's still a bit unclear whether this was due to the LGBTQ themes or whether it was due to Disney losing a lot of money in 2020. Disney also hasn't been afraid to use LGBTQ characters in far more diverse and dynamic ways. For example, in the show Amphibia, we have the character Mr. X, who works for the CIA and acts as an antagonist in Series 3. and it's just RuPaul. It's just RuPaul playing RuPaul, but now he works for the CIA. The great thing is that in the last few years, every time an animated show introduces an LGBTQ storyline, there are fewer news articles talking about it. Less outrage pushing back. And that's good because it means it's becoming more and more normal. So there we have it. The LGBTQ community is finally getting a bit of representation in animation. J.K. Rowling would be rolling in her grave if she knew. She is? Oh. And they're making a third one? Hang on, so she still gets to be an Aquaman though? No, I don't believe that. Google it now. Also, please comment, like and subscribe.